afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at Auto Innovators 2024 Auto Tech Showcase. So my name is Tara Hairston, and I am super excited to have this conversation with four great panelists on the topic of vehicle to everything technology, or more commonly known as V2X. Today, we're going to explore the opportunities presented by this technology, why we're talking about this technology in this particular moment, and what else is needed to realize this technology's potential life-saving benefits. So the run of show will be, I will introduce each panelist very briefly, and then we will allow them some time to give some opening remarks, and then we'll dive into our conversation. So first, let me start to my left. Want to introduce Mr. Michael Graham, a member of the National Transportation Safety Board. Next to Michael is Brian Cronin. Sure, applaud, please. Next to Mr. Graham is Brian Cronin, Director of the Intelligent Transportation Systems Joint Program Office at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Next to Mr. Cronin is Andres Castrillon, Senior Director of Government Affairs for Qualcomm. And last but certainly not least, we have Melissa Tye, Associate General Counsel for Emerging Technologies at Verizon. So I'm going to turn it over to our panel for opening remarks. Mr. Graham, would you like to start?
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thank you for the invitation. It was great just to get downstairs and walk around a little bit again this year and look at all the neat technology that's out there on the vehicles now, and some of the groundbreaking technology that'll be out there in the future. You know, from the NTSB side of the house, you know, we're here for one reason: to save lives. And I look at some of the great technology down there and what it's doing right now. Some of the sensors on those vehicles out there that are, you know, trying to work on impairment and fatigue and distraction issues, occupant protection, you name it. Those are all things that save lives. But I'm really excited to talk about V2X because I think it has incredible potential, and it's one of the most promising technologies out there to save lives in the future here. And when you look at the number of lives we lose every year, I think the 2023 data is out there now, almost 41,000 lives lost. We need to do more, and I think technology is one of the solutions when you're talking about human behaviors out there and all the issues you have with that, and we're not going to change everybody's behavior. So technology is something that can help. And, you know, I look back, I think it was 1995, the NTSB, well before I was ever there, made a recommendation about V2X. In 1999, we got some spectrum out there from the FCC, but here, it's been, what, 25 years now? And we haven't saved a single life yet with V2X in a production automobile. So we've got some work to do, especially since by the end of this day, we'll lose well over 100 more people on our highways. So I'm excited about what's coming down the road. I know they're close. I know we're all sitting on pins and needles. And I just hope, since looking back, was almost 3 years, it was 3 years ago when we lost spectrum, and I think the whole issue was just about dead, to see that now we're close to a nationwide plan. We've seen a draft. I just hope we can accelerate it so we don't have to lose well over 100 people every day still. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Michael. Brian?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thrilled to be here. I mean, wow, what a year makes for the Alliance. I think last year I was here, and maybe one of the automotive sectors was talking V2X and showing some things. And just today I've been in 4 different demonstrations and talks. We got the whole community talking about V2X. We issued our draft plan last fall, tremendous interest, support, over 700 comments talking about how we talk about V2X from both a cellular V2X and network V2X, thinking about all the spectrum and all the communications capabilities that we need. We are on the cusp of getting out the plan and announcing some grants But let's not stop there. I'm looking at this amazing bridge back here. Just reminds me of the bipartisan infrastructure law. We are funding over $238 million of V2X deployments right now without the accelerator grants. These are grants from the ATTAIN program, from the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, from the SMART program. So on an infrastructure side, we are already stimulating the market for V2X deployment. It is coming, it is there. We need the automotive sector partnering. I really liked the demo from Audi and Spoke. I just thinking about bikes. I was in one of the scenarios last night. I was biking home and biking along, and a car in front of me did not have a signal on and decided to go right where I would have hit them. And so there's really, you can think about scenarios where V2X will save your life, prevent a crash, and how we talk to the community and how we start really thinking about, as the plan is coming into place, the FCC is going to finalize rules, how do we move this from a research and thinking about it to doing it and deploying and getting V2X into everyday users, have our children have it on their bikes, in their backpacks, have our first responders have it out at work zones. So we're there. We're thrilled to work with all our partners to make V2X happen.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Andres?
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So I think we're a little bit of a unique company when it comes to the companies that are here at the Auto Tech Showcase, right? We're here as a technology enabler. So Qualcomm is not a consumer-facing company. You're not going to go to a store and buy a Qualcomm product off the shelf. But whether you realize it or not, you're interacting with Qualcomm technology all day, throughout your day. A lot of you are on your phones. A lot of you have brought tablets. Our chips are in those products. We've also been in the automotive industry for over 20 years. Our chips are enabling telematics. Our chips are enabling life-saving ADAS technologies. Our chips are enabling 5G and 4G connectivity in your vehicle. And when it comes to that role as a technology enabler, one of the technologies that we're most excited about and that we've really been pushing as part of a broader coalition to get on the road, to get deployed, to transition towards that deployment phase that Brian just mentioned, is V2X technology. And so our chipsets also enable the communication that we see through V2X. And so super excited to be here, super excited to talk about the great momentum that we have behind deployment of C-V2X. And I think why this moment is a little bit different than some of the moments that we've had in the history of V2X, the very long history that Member Graham alluded to. So thrilled to be here. Thanks for having us, Tara, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Thanks, Andres. Melissa?
Well, first I want to say thanks to the Alliance for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for everybody for joining today. So I'm from Verizon, which I think probably most people you're all familiar with. And what I wanted to start with is just kind of level setting. So, we've heard C-V2X or V2X several times already. And I think it's interesting because there's not a lot of clarity on what exactly people mean when they say that. And so, we like to be specific and distinguish between the direct V2X that uses the 5.9 spectrum and where it's direct device-to-device communications, and then network V2X, which utilizes the commercial wireless networks like Verizon's. And as you may not be surprised to hear, we are really excited about the potential for commercial wireless networks to be a partner, to be a complement to the direct V2X. We're not here to, we're here to work with all partners, both on direct as well as network V2X, but I do think it's important that we recognize that there is more than one flavor of V2X, and that both have a very important role to play in making our roadways safer. So, I'm excited to talk more about the ways that our network can be leveraged for safety. And again, thanks to the Alliance for having me.
Thank you, Melissa. So I actually had as my first question to do a bit of level setting for the audience. What is V2X? I think you've done a great job in communicating that, so we'll move on. One thing, You know, a number of you in your opening remarks talked about saving lives and the potential of this technology to do that, which is obviously critically important, as unfortunately we're seeing the wrong trajectory in terms of the number of lives lost. Is there any other benefits or opportunities that you want to highlight for the group today in terms of for V2X? Anybody can take that question? Sure.
I'll go first. I want everybody to know where the NTSB comes from with V2X. When, there's a lot of applications out there. They're almost endless of what we can do with V2X out there. And I know a lot of them will, help control traffic movement and fuel efficiencies and things like that. That's great, but we're in it for one reason and one reason only, and that's imminent crash prevention. So you probably say, well, wait a second. We've got a lot of really good onboard sensors out there in a lot of these vehicles, and more vehicles are getting them, and these sensors are maturing. Yes, I agree. But there's also limitations to those sensors, line of sight, inclement weather, the profile of other vehicles and objects and vulnerable road users and things like that. V2X can help be a redundant system for onboard sensors and help assist the driver. And I think that's where the promise really comes in there, and that's what we're really looking at, is to prevent as many crashes as we can out there. Let's reduce those numbers, let's reduce injuries, and let's save lives with this. And I think V2X can do it for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm right there with Member Graham. I mean, that's why we want V2X, both cellular V2X and thinking about network V2X and thinking about digital alerting and all the different kind of safety things that you can think about, from the crash imminent prevention to just raising awareness that there is a emergency vehicle coming up behind you. And so, but part of the conversation, we need to get more of the fleet equipped to be able to enable that crash imminent. So we're doing a lot talking with the public sector around both their fleet vehicles and intersections and work zones, that you need to install the capability to communicate, whether that is having network communication or an actual roadside unit or an onboard unit. And so a lot of we talk with the state and locals is, take for instance in Utah, they've equipped their snowplows in addition to their intersections. And next thing you know, they are plowing roads 50% faster because those snowplows are connected to the intersections. So that provides a safety benefit. It also gets you to ski slope faster. But in Georgia, they're equipping school buses with some of this technology connected to intersection. That is enabling kids who need to get to school to get their free reduced breakfast. They were taking the school bus and it was getting stuck in traffic and they were not getting to school in time. So you can think about many different scenarios that are going to have benefit now while we build towards enough of the ecosystem to have that crash imminent safety. And so we're spending a lot of time really talking about the use cases and being able to educate the community. There's a wide array. We're doing this for safety, but let's take advantage of other safety use cases and just other benefits where this technology will play.
Great. Thank you, Brian. So did you want to enter?
Yeah, if I could just jump in
sure.
quickly. I think what we're hearing is the beauty of V2X is its versatility, right? So for these crash imminent use cases, right, that's really vehicle to vehicle. I see you, you see me, let's not crash into each other, right? And that's where the direct mode of CV2X really comes into play and is really critical. But then there's this broader range of potential use cases that have been alluded to. And the beauty of that is if we look at the 19 states that have told the FCC, we're intending to deploy, we need your permission to deploy CV2X. It's states from coast to coast, Oregon to Maine, Florida to Michigan, Texas. Each one of these states is coming to the table with a different problem statement. Sometimes it's a congested city-urban environment. Sometimes it's rural use cases, and with the snowplow example. Sometimes it's how do I make my school zones safer. Sometimes it's how do I make my work zones safer? And that's really the beauty of this technology. And I think Melissa put it well. There are different flavors of V2X. There are different use cases depending on the problem statement that you're arriving to the conversation with. There's probably a V2X use case for you. Member Graham is absolutely right. Saving lives is the North Star, and that vehicle-to-vehicle imminent crash scenario is what we're really pushing to get off the road. But then once you have that capability out on the road, you can use it for a wide range of other use cases.
And I think one other aspect that hasn't really been touched on, maybe you kind of got to it a little bit, is the congestion and how V2X can help with environmental concerns. If traffic flows more efficiently, things move faster, we can reduce the emissions on the road. And even that goes back to a safety angle, because it can improve the health of our communities, and that's no small thing. The efficiency, it also means, people getting home to loved ones, making, your kid's soccer game, things like that. Brian mentioned emergency responders. Safety isn't just about car crashes. And frankly, it's not just about deaths in car crashes. There can be significant injuries that may not be recorded in that 44,000 number, but can be, just as life impacting as a death. So I think, really the versatility and the scope of the use cases can't be understated.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. So, Melissa, in your opening remarks, you specifically mentioned 5.9. Mm-hmm. And you often hear about 5.9 in the context of V2X. I'm just curious if you can give a little bit more explanation about what is 5.9 and what does it have to do with this technology?
So 5.9, it's the spectrum band that was allocated by the FCC over 30 years ago to specifically for V2X. Well, at the time, specifically for automotive operations. And generally speaking, and Verizon's very familiar with this, a lot of times when the FCC allocates spectrum, they just say commercial wireless. And you guys, if you get a license to use it, do what you want with it. And this, with 5.9, they said, no, it's got to be used for automotive communication purposes. And specifically, it was used for direct communication services. So when we're talking about network V2X, we're using our entire wireless network, and we're specifically not using 5.9. 5.9 is just for the direct automotive communications. I'm guessing Andres would like to talk more about that, because Verizon, we don't hold 5.9, and that's not what we're using. But other companies are much more active in this area.
Yeah, so I think Melissa put it really well. It's a dedicated spectrum that the FCC has allocated specifically for ITS communications. Originally, it was allocated for an older technology called DSRC. The FCC came out about 2.5 years ago and said we're going to reallocate the upper portion of this band specifically for a communications protocol called cellular vehicle to everything technology, CV2X technology. We're going to reserve 30 megahertz of spectrum specifically for direct communications. And so, when we talk about sort of the complementary nature, 30 megahertz is fantastic. We need to figure out a way to utilize it. But we can't do all of the use cases that we've talked about, right? This versatility. We can't do all of those within that 30 megahertz, which is why it's really critical that the network mode of V2X come in as a complement to that direct mode, and that as we coordinate with Brian and others on what a national deployment plan looks like, we're sort of focused on what are we going to do with that 5.9 gigahertz band, and what are we going to do with the network, and how do we do that in a complementary way. The reason that you hear a lot about the 5.9 gigahertz band is because we're waiting for one final step from the FCC to allow broad deployment. The FCC has not come out with what's called a second report and order, but at a high level, it's the final rules, the technical parameters around which infrastructure owner-operators and automakers will be able to deploy. So there's an interim process right now called a waiver process. And that has worked well, but we really need that second report and order. We need that regulatory clarity from the FCC in order to deploy. I think we're going to see that at some point this year. But in a nutshell, that's the 5.9 gigahertz band.
Thank you both. To that point, that we have that kind of final step with the FCC. Brian, I'd be curious from your perspective, how is DOT working with FCC on these issues, and what has that communication been like? I'm not asking you to make news, but just kind of curious what that interaction is like.
Yeah, it has evolved. So I'd like to talk about it for how it's been the last 6 months. Since we issued our draft plan, we've been meeting with the FCC monthly, and more often if needed. We are really talking through and representing, from our understanding, the industry's needs related to getting a second report in order out quickly, but also things around sort of out-of-band emissions, things around interference with spectrum below or above the band now that we only have 30 megahertz. And so we have through NTIA, we have a very open and robust conversation. We've also been doing a significant amount of testing. And so we've been sharing that data, sharing the results, sort of publicly making that information available. So I say it's robust and strong. We're pleased. We think we're getting very close. And I think I'd like to add sort of one last thing on sort of the 5.9 conversation. I would like to thank the mobile network operators because a lot has come since we were only talking about 5.9. And one of the biggest comments on our plan was you need to be talking about what we're now saying network V2X and the use of 5G, because we can provide so much connectivity solutions through that, and there are use cases that do not need the low latency security. Oh, they need the security and trust, but in a different way than 5.9 is set to provide it. And so we have been working with them to actually set up a bunch of testing to really understand what use cases can happen perfectly fine through cellular. Ones that we routinely would say, it's just not fast enough, it's not reliable enough, whatever other parameter. And things that advance so much, that's probably not the case. So we're really pleased with the testing that we're getting underway, the conversation, so we can understand, 5.9 and that low latency, crash imminent, nobody's questioning that. Like, that is what that's for, we need it. But let's leverage the other communications as well.
Thank you. So obviously, Andres, you mentioned the states across the nation that are doing deployments. Is there anything else that can be shared about the current state of adoption when it comes to V2X?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start and then the others can jump in. So we've got 19 states that have gone to the FCC and said, we would like to declare, we would like a waiver to declare. And I think all but one has received the waiver, and I think the other one is just because they're the last on the list. So they're next up. Wide variety of use cases. We also have 5 automakers that have submitted waiver requests to the FCC. Right? When we were having this discussion at this time last year, I think it was somewhere around 10 states and only 3 automakers, right? And so, we're seeing those early deployments on the infrastructure side, right? The states outnumber the automakers at this point. And, this is an important conversation to have because one of the things that we've always struggled with on this technology is it's a cooperative technology, and we've always had a bit of a chicken-egg dilemma, right? Automakers have always said, we're interested in deploying, but we want to make sure that there's something out there to communicate with, right? This is a unique technology in its collaborative nature, cooperative nature, that if my car alone has the technology and no one else's does, it's not doing me any good. And so, we're seeing this momentum behind deployment, and I think we're living through a moment in real time where the infrastructure side is stepping up and kind of taking care of the chicken-egg dilemma for us. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think part of that, the credit goes to the work on the National Deployment Plan, because the department has really used its convening power to bring parties together and say, how do we deploy in a cooperative manner? And it's given some of the stakeholders on the infrastructure side, I think, a little bit more certainty that if they invest in the technology, that the ecosystem is going to build up around them. The other thing I think that has acted as a catalyst for deployment is IIJA funding, right? Once in a lifetime funding to modernize our technology, 4 or 5 specific grant programs that make connected vehicle technology eligible. And we're seeing states and cities utilize that funding to deploy V2X. And then we lost some spectrum, right? We had 75 megahertz originally, now we've got 30. That was the bad news. But the good news is that the industry, after that happened, really started to coalesce around, we have to deploy CV2X in order to preserve the spectrum and then support it, with the network-based communication. So this moment feels different, right? You're seeing a level of collaboration across industry that we haven't seen before. You're seeing trade associations that historically were in sort of different positions as to what should happen, all now actively collaborating. Over the last 18 months, you're really seeing all corners of the ITS ecosystem really sing from the same song sheet. And I think what you're going to see as a result of that is deployments start to take hold. So the short answer to your question would be, we're in the early stages of deployment, but man, do we have like some real wind at our backs and some real momentum.
Great. So I think one of the cool things about network V2X is when we improve our network, it improves the potential and the opportunities for network V2X. So Verizon invests billions in our network every year. And as our technology improves, so I'm sure you've heard right now, we're going hard on deploying 5G. And what 5G has done is it's reduced the latency. And so a lot of these use cases, as Brian mentioned, where before when we had 4G LTE, these use cases were just supporting some of these V2X. It just wasn't possible. But as we've deployed 5G and we have increased bandwidth and faster speeds, lower latencies, now we can support a lot of the use cases that we previously could not. We're also deploying multi-edge access compute, which means that we're moving kind of like the brains of the network closer to the users, closer to the roadways. That also allows us to support use cases that we couldn't before. So I think, even when we're not necessarily talking about V2X specifically, the investments that we're making on our network benefit V2X. And then I also want to point to a few V2X specific things that we're doing. So one of the concerns with network V2X is interoperability. So interoperability between carriers. If someone has a T-Mobile phone and somebody has a Verizon phone, how are they going to communicate? Well, we actually solved that problem a long time ago, and we can solve it for V2X. And we've got pilot programs out there that have proved that. We've also done pilot programs that have proven inter-carrier interoperability across borders. So we did a pilot with TELUS. And then we're also working with our friends in the direct V2X community to ensure interoperability between direct and network. So all of these things are in pilots, we're moving forward, and we're really excited about them.
Great. Member Graham, you mentioned that NTSB first made their recommendation related to V2X in 1995. We are nearly 30 years out. What would you call for with industry, with regulators, with the broader community around this technology? What is your call to action for all of us?
Call to action, I think it was already pointed out that this is a collaborative technology, and it can't be just one manufacturer, an auto manufacturer, or one infrastructure owner-operator that can go do this. If we're going to achieve the full safety benefit of this technology, we've all got to work together. It's great that we're having the communication now amongst the community. I know when we first had the get-together at DOT that the industry and the regulators and everybody else, nobody had talked for 6 years about this. So now we're having conversations. I know Brian and his team's done a great job with the draft plan. They're talking to the FCC all the time. That's the other one. The FCC wasn't talking with anybody. The fact that we're talking about it is great. The fact that we hopefully have a final plan coming forward here real soon, that's great. But like I said, we've got to really move on this. We have some momentum and we have an opportunity, we need to take here to save lives. And I think we're very close.
Well, we have just run out of time. Nice job, everybody. So thank you again for participating in this panel, and thank you to all of you again for joining us. We hope you've learned a lot about V2X and what the potential opportunities are, and that we as a community can work together to save lives and reverse these horrible trends about lives being lost on our nation's roads. So thank you, and please thank our panelists.